Hello everybody, embarking on a new project here. So I bought this a vase, I guess is what it is. Yes, there's a vase because there's an opening at the top at the thrift store for $8. And not because I like the vase at all, but because I thought the holder, the frame, the stand could be kind of cool. So this glass is going to go right into the recycling bin, and then I'm going to reuse this holder. You know, it's not the nicest, but you know, it's a decent quality and seems sturdy enough. I am going to start by making my base piece of glass. So I've measured this, and on the inside from edge to edge, it looks like the biggest I could go on my glass is about 7.5 inches. And so I was trying to decide. I love Tabitha's videos where she's done floral things, and I think that's what this lends itself to as well. She often uses a piece of base glass and then uses some powdered frit to kind of create her own background, kind of part sheet. But I wanted to use more scrap on this and use this as a scrap project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out a bunch of greens and blues that I have and kind of build a background for this. I have to decide how tall I want to go, but because the stand is pretty sturdy, I think I could go relatively tall. So I'm going to do some measurements on this, and I have a stainless steel former that is 8 inches wide. This is only 7.5. So my options are to cut off one end, but I don't have a saw. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do instead is just line it with some additional fiber paper on each side to get it to 7.5 inches so that it would fit in here. So I'm going to start by cleaning up some glass scrap and arranging it into my former and go from there. So stay tuned and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, you can see what I've done here. I had some fiber paper strip inside my form already because I spray these with Zip per Laurie's recommendation, and you can get several uses out of it if you're really careful. But I added some extra strips on each side that are 12 inches long, and then this gets me to about, I don't know if you can see that well, about 7.5 inches on each side. So I added 2 extra strips. I'm going to hit those with Zip too, just so I get a nice clean edge to them when I pull them out. And there may be a little bit of cold working that has to be done, but it won't be too bad. So I'm going to hit these with Zip, and then I'm going to start to lay my glass in. Okay, so I thought I had more transparent green than I do, because I really want most of this to be transparent, but I do have this amazing spring green and aventurine streaky. That's a pretty big piece of scrap. I know a lot of people wouldn't consider that scrap, but it's got the rolled edge, so I think I'm going to cut this down and use this a little bit. And then you might remember the underwater projects that I did where it had this clear with this inky blue. I think that would make a good top part for kind of the sky area. I'll probably add some frit, maybe even some powder to kind of give some additional dimension across this thing. But I think for the most part, I'm going to use this green and this blue. And one of these pieces, remember how I was, if you saw that other video, I was really trying to keep the rolled edge. So I'm going to cut this and use the rolled edge as the top, and I'm not going to butt it right up against the mold, because then I'll have that nice organic looking top, which would be kind of cool then for that stand. So I'm going to start to cut this stuff up after I clean it and assemble my base piece. As you can see, I just tried to kind of layer up the blues and the clear and the green down here below. I added some clean, broken up Tecta just to try to create enough volume in here that I don't end up with any big holes or gaps or bubbles. I don't know. We'll see how this turns out. I'm going to do a super good bubble squeeze because I don't want any air trapped in there, or as little as possible. I don't actually mind bubbles in some of my glass, but I certainly don't want a big blowout. So I'll think about my firing schedule here to do this one, and it'll go pretty hot because I want to get a nice solid melt on this. So let's see what it looks like when it comes out of the kiln. Okay, here it is out of the kiln. This fired quite nice. There were just a few spikes on some of the corners, so I took it to my grinder and ground them down. I'm trying to put this in front of the window so that you can see. I guess I could open the blinds, but there's some good light that passes through there. Now, I did have to grind again on a couple of the edges, but that's fine because I'm putting this back in to add components to it, so that should fire polish off nicely. There's a little bit of devitrification. You probably can't even see it. It's just a very light haze that's starting to form. So before I build this out any further, I'm probably going to take a diamond pad and knock some of that off just with some good old elbow grease. And then I'll add a light layer of clear powder before I fire this component overall when I add other things to it. But overall, I'm very pleased. I think that the use of that scrap for the sky and for the ground looks cool. You see those areas where the tecta, kind of diffused some of that color in just a neat pattern. And now this is going to get covered up with lots of flowers and components and things, so I'm not too concerned about that, but I think it's just cool looking anyway. I did get a couple of big bubbles. They're all under the surface, and as I've said multiple times, bubbles don't always bother me in glass because I think it kind of adds a cool effect, but they're under the surface, and so I'm not too worried about them. You could potentially drill those out and refire at a full fuse to try to get those to go away. I just don't think that's necessary. It fits well in my stand here that I've cleaned up, and that's about it. So now I'm going to start building my components. I have a couple of different things I'm going to use, and so I'll show you that process here in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to fill this thing up with flowers of different variety, and many moons ago I did a piece that had tulips, and I don't know if you remember that, but it's back in my feed. And so I still had a couple of components left and thought it would be nice to go ahead and do a tulip on this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually tack fuse this as a component together first. And I've got some other things I'm also tack fusing. This little guy I'm just putting in here for a little stability in the middle. And so I will take this in a kiln firing up to, oops, let's see here. I don't think that was the right, I think I want, let's see, what orientation do I want? Anyway, I'm just going to take this up to a kind of a tack fuse to get it to tack together, but I don't want anything too super hot. And then I'm going to assemble the component onto my platter and refire it anyway. So I'll just take this up to, I don't know, 1280 or 1300 or so and hold it for a little while, and then bring it back down. So that's one piece, and I've got a couple of other I'll show you in just a moment as well. Okay, by now you all know that I'm a super fan of Tabitha Burrell and also Lori Moreno and the amazing Murini that they make, and Millefiori. I am going to use some of that in this piece as well. But I also have some water jet cuts here that came from SS Glass Arts on Etsy, and so I'll drop the link if you want. And these are beautiful water jet cuts. These two are obviously sunflowers, and then these two are daffodils, and I thought that they would look cool on there as well. The water jet here is very precise, and this is beautiful work, but I'm a little worried about these looking kind of flat or a little one-dimensional compared to the beautiful Millefiori and such that I'm going to use with a lot of detail. So I'm going to take an attempt at enhancing these just a little bit. Again, they're great as they come, but for my piece and what I'm doing, and there's going to be so much dimension and detail in here, I wanted to bump these up just a little bit. So I'll show you what that is going to look like, and then we'll cross our fingers that it works well. Okay, so what I have here is something I've never used before. I was actually watching a Tabitha video a while back, and she had used this medium pen, perfect medium pen. And so I found them on Amazon and ordered them. The package came and it was already opened, or it had busted open in the shipping. But this is a 2-pack, and I'm gonna play with these and do a whole separate video on it. But for now, I'm gonna use these in this way. This says Perfect Medium from Ranger brand, and this is a brush style. And it also came with what they call a bullet style tip, but I'm going to use the brush style tip. And essentially what this is it says, use this with pigment powders on dark colored paper. And so it's an embossing kind of pen. It's, you know, essentially like a glue, if you will, or a medium that then allows stuff to stick. And I thought it might give me some control in trying to add. I just have some Bullseye 125 orange here. So in order to add a little bit more color depth to this water jet, I thought it might be cool to almost try to do a little bit of shading on the petals. So what's interesting here is you can't really see this as you're working on it. It, you know, applies clear, but I'm basically just adding a little bit of shading to each petal, or a little smear of this medium. You can't see it, but in the glare, I can kind of see that it's going on wet. It's very difficult to pick up, but yeah, I can see it's definitely going on there. And once I do all of these, and now of course I've lost track of where I started. Am I back to the beginning? I think I am. Okay, so now I'm going to just take some of this powder. I have a very fancy tool here, a straw from a restaurant that I've cut the tip off of and kind of made as a little scoop. And so I'm just going to hold this over my jar and just kind of put some powdered frit on, and then just kind of knock it off. Yeah, it's working. So I'm just applying powder frit all the way around where I had that medium. This is going to be subtle for sure, but that's what I was looking for. I'm not looking for anything, you know, kind of outrageous on this thing. Look at that. Looks like I missed one. So now I got to go back and add right there. And it is a light amount of powder for sure. It's not a lot, but that's okay. Now I'm going to fire it and we'll see. Can you see that okay? Now we'll see how much of that powder. This is orange on the water jet. I don't know the exact color of this water jet. It's probably, I mean, it's just one of the Bullseye yellows, but I figured orange would be a nice complement to this perhaps. So I'm going to try that. So I'll put the center in the middle and fire that on this little guy. This one's smaller, but I'm gonna kind of do the same thing, honestly. I'm just gonna try to hit each one of these just a little bit. And add just a little, you know, little dimension, little something extra to it. Now, it's such a fine amount of powder, I won't be surprised if it kind of just fires away and you can't see that at all. But it's worth playing with and just having some fun, right? See what happens. Okay, making kind of a mess here, but all right, so yeah, I just got a little bit on the tips, just enough, and we'll fire those and see what happens. So now I'm gonna do the same on this daffodil. This is the yellow center that goes in that one, and I thought I would try to give this a little bit of depth by just adding a punch of orange, and I'm just gonna dip this right where the inside of the cone on a daffodil would be. So hopefully that fires in nicely and gives me a little extra color there. That would be kind of neat. Yeah, I like that. All right, so there's that. And then I have this yellow daffodil. I'm gonna do kind of the same thing. I'm gonna actually just put streaks down the middle of these petals. Coat it with orange. As I do this, I'm really hoping this works. This could be an experiment that turns out to be a big fat nothing, but all right, so you see how I just put some striping on that daffodil? And then his little center here is almost all the way orange anyway, but I'll just add a little bit more color. There he is. These will all go in the kiln on that same firing that the tulip piece is going in. Okay, so then on this guy, I'm done with the orange now. On this white daffodil with the orange or the yellow center, I know it's probably not found in nature this way, but I'm gonna add some striping again. And this time I'm gonna add some salmon colored powder that I happen to have handy. I thought the salmon could look kind of neat. So, a little jar of salmon. In fact, it might just be easier to kind of dip them in and pull it back out. Yeah, there's my salmon powder on that one. So we're gonna take these in to a firing. Like I said, probably go about 1280 maybe, and just hold it for 5 minutes or so. And then I'll show you what the components look like as I start to build out the bigger piece. Okay, one more quickie before it goes into the kiln. I have some scraps from Tabitha that are just random pieces, including this piece of vitrograph and this little twisty. And I thought that guy laid on there just perfectly to make a stem and, a stem and a leaf, perhaps for under my tulip. So I'm gonna go ahead and tack those together too in this same firing. So here it goes in, all components ready to go, and we'll see what they look like when they come out. Okay, so I have taken a diamond pad, a pretty low grit, 120 I think, and just hit this hard on each side so you can see it's all, you know, kind of marred up here and buffed off. But I'm going to cover the whole thing in clear powder after I apply my components to it. So that should heal up very nicely. And speaking of components, let's take a look at what I've pulled out of the kiln. So this is the petals that become, for me, the tulip. And you'll remember I talked about this stem and this piece of vitrograph pull that I just tack fused together because I think they look really cool. And that's going to become a flower on there. So I'm real pleased with how those turned out. On the experiments with the pen and the powders, I thought this might happen, and this is the case. The powders are so thin and so light, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it on the video. There is a little bit of subtle variation there with the orange, but it is subtle. But I'm not displeased with it. I think what I'm going to do though is hit it with the pen again and do another layer of the powders before I put it on my piece, and then that can all fire on when it's doing the contour fuse in the kiln. So, you know, this would look a lot different with enamels, I think. I'm going to do experiments with this because I think it's kind of an interesting concept to play with. But for the purposes of this, I don't dislike it. So even just looking at it here in person, the orange adds just a little bit of subtleness to it so that it's not such a flat yellow. But I'm going to do a little bit more for the next firing. Same on this guy. Again, the tips are orange and they do look a little bit better, but I'm going to do some more to that. On the daffodil here, the orange is subtle. Again, I'm going to redo that, and it's kind of subtle on there as well. On this daffodil, remember I did salmon, and you can really hardly see it probably on video. I can see it very lightly. So same thing, I'm gonna just go back over that. Now this orange did show up a little bit better on the daffodil center because I was heavier on the powder on that one, kind of as an experiment. And so it worked out better there, and you can see that. And I think that adds a little something beyond just the flat color. Now, I also have tons of other components to play with as I build this out, and it's gonna take me a while. As you know, I'm a fan of Tabitha. I've got some vitrograph from Tabitha. I've got lots of flowers and components that I can play with from her. Lori Moreno, tons of flowers that I'm gonna play with here, things that I've pressed. She has some larger chunks, and so I'm gonna play around with those on this thing. I'm gonna play around with you know, maybe some other vitrograph pulls. We'll see what I've got. Nancy Sala with Kaleidoglass. I haven't talked about Nancy before, but I bought some stuff from her last year just because I felt like I needed to have it, but I didn't have the perfect project for it, and now I think I do. So I'm going to show you some of the elements that I purchased from her and I've been hoarding for a while that I'm planning on using on this. So I am going to build this slowly. I'll use my mixture of Elmer's clear glue and some of the pink glass tack from Bullseye, just to create some stuff that'll help tack this down. I might even put some frit at the bottom to kind of be some grass or some confetti maybe. I don't know. We're gonna play with it and see what happens. So I'm gonna put it on time lapse and I'm going to start building this thing out. Okay, here we are. You were probably thinking, my goodness, when is this guy gonna stop? And I just couldn't stop. I kept adding stuff. I was having so much fun. So you can see elements in here that were from Tabitha. The vitrograph is from Tabitha. Some of these mandalas that I wanted to turn into flowers are from Tabitha. The, you know, these little things, I don't even remember what they were sold as, but I was like, yeah, those look floral, so let's do it. So I've got that little stuff in there. I threw a yellow one at the top here to represent the sun. Then I've got lots of stuff from Lori Moreno. These, most of the leaves, in fact, I think all the little leaves that I tucked in here and there. The pressed flowers, the little bit smaller flowers. Obviously, I've got a ladybug in here because I love doing ladybugs on these floral pieces for good luck. So lots of little pressed flowers from Lori. And then, oh, and of course the caterpillar. And then these are called drops. And then these were calla lilies. So the calla lilies and the drops were two of the things from Nancy at Kaleidoglass. Those are flame worked pieces, but they are, for me, they're COE 90 and used in fusing. So I added those two pieces, or those two elements from Nancy. And then finally the water jet cuts that are from SS Glass Art. And so I've got those here, the sunflowers, the daffodils, and a little dichroic butterfly that also came, and that guy's tiny, and I thought that would just be fun. I realized I was bottom loading this thing really heavily and I didn't have anything for up above, and so I added a couple of elements. I could have taken my flowers up into the sky if I had thought about that to begin with, but I didn't. So anyway, this is the piece as it is now. I'm going to let it dry just a little bit. As you see, I was tacking it down again. This is just kind of my own mixture of pink glass tack and clear Elmer's glue, and I just do about 50-50. It's not as thick as Elmer's, it's not as runny as the pink glass tack. I just don't have any blue around. The blue gel would probably work great. But you know, I find this works well and it burns off nicely. I also use hairspray, so just in a little needle nose bottle, plain old dollar store hairspray, that works well. So I'm going to let these things kind of glue on here a little bit and dry, and then I'm going to dust the entire thing with a very light layer of clear powder and put it in my kiln for a probably tack-ish fuse. I'll decide on the schedule and then share what that is. So this is going to go on a super long anneal. If you look, I mean, this base piece is already thick. And then I've got, you know, these pieces stacked up 2 and 3 deep all the way across. And, you know, that is a lot of glass, a lot of layers and depth, and contour fuse as it adds stress already. So I'm not kidding. I mean, it's going to be, I'll probably do like an 8-hour anneal hold on this, which is probably more than I need, but I just want to be extra conservative, and then a very, very slow cooling on down. So gosh, I'm thinking through this. This might be a 24-hour or longer kiln run, but that's all right. I am eager to see what this looks like when it comes out, and it does have a pretty high cry factor, so I want to be very conservative in my approach to make sure that it comes out nice and fused well. So stand by. Okay, everybody, I just pulled this guy out of the kiln and I love it. The firing itself, I took it to 1350 and I held for, I think, 10 minutes. But yes, I went for an 8-hour anneal and then a super slow ramp down from there. So it was in the kiln, total runtime was like 25 hours. And then it finished cooling. But here it is. So I'm going to get it in its stand and I'll take some pictures. So stay tuned for those. I'll show you the photos in a little bit. but I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled. The texture is amazing. I really wanted a very light contour, very light tack really fuse on these pieces. Look at that little ladybug, so much fun. So I added extra powder using that pen, brush pen, and that daffodil has really nice color and dimension to it. Same with this one. You can now start to see the salmon just a little bit better. I don't know if that's coming through on the photo, on the camera as well. The tips that I added to my sunflowers are just perfect now. So yes, it took 2 layers of powder and firing to get that look, but that's exactly what I was going for. The pieces from Nancy just really pop on here. These calla lilies, these drops. Look at that little bug. That one's from Tabitha, the caterpillar there. So any regrets that I might have, I don't know about regrets, but these guys kind of shrunk up, or as this fused, this moved away from the stem. That's okay. I don't mind so much. I just think that the glass kind of all shrunk up, and I don't know that it moved necessarily, but just shrunk, and so that's okay. It looks fine. Same here. This pulled in a little bit on the inside of that water jet cut. What I might have done if I had thought about it was added a little, even clear frit would have been great. Just a little bit of medium frit to add some texture to the middle of that sunflower, because clear would allow that brown to see through, and then you wouldn't necessarily see a gap like that. Or some brown frit or something would have been cool on there. To call that a regret, though, is probably too strong of a word. Just a couple things I might do a little bit differently if I were reconstructing this again. But overall, I'm thrilled. Okay, so now let me take some pictures, put it in the stand, and show you what it looks like in its final form.